Okay, hello. I today now I am going to learn things about how the Spring Boot application works. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, for the opening basic Spring Boot application means it is a official site of the start.spring.io. Okay, first of all we need to go there. Then here we need to fill some our Spring Boot project related data like which language we are using. Here some group like com.example.springboot boot, dot first step for example. Okay. Here RT you can add artifact like first step. Okay. Then this is a jar file and we are going to use Java version 21. Okay, and here we are use Spring Boot version 3.4.4. Here we are for dependency means Spring Boot provides some functionality to add dependency. So if we are adding we are add dependency, then that dependency related bins jar file is all automatically created and they are stored in the class path. So first we are as of now just we are going to make one web related simple application. So we are adding first of all spring web uh, web dependency. Okay, and just if you want to explore, then you can show what is the what how the form.xml looks like. Okay, so here you can show that, but just we need to go and like we need to click download. Here is the application is downloaded. Okay, okay. Now we are using IntelliJ IDE for develop any development work related to Spring Boot. So here is that. Hmm. Now we are going to open one application. So first of all, we are uh, make some notes like hmm, okay, what is the what is Spring Boot? Okay, Spring Boot is a Java supported framework which is used to the developed Java web and Java supported web and enterprise application. Okay, and Spring Boot is developed on top of Spring framework and main feature of Spring Boot is auto configuration, duration, embedded Tomcat server, and this is the like main features. Okay, so um, like we we are adding dependency. See, like web dependency for creating MVC related work, JPA for database related work, and so on. Okay, once we add any dependency, see uh, the beans which are related to that dependency are automatically created by Spring Spring Boot framework work and add jar files on class path. Okay, now we are going to first take application. So for that, first we are extract all extract that zip file. Okay, now we are going to open. So now we are going to download folder. Where is download? Hmm. First step and OK. Like trust project and new window. Okay, we are going to load that application. So here we are adding pom.x. Okay, so here we are going to we are here we can see this is the pom.xml file we are adding Spring Boot starter test and test is or by default came, but we are adding Spring Boot starter web dependencies. Okay, using that dependency, some jar files are created and they are stored in the class path. Okay. Now we are first of all we are going to show. structure. Here we can see external like libraries like files. But okay, so based on our dependency, web dependency, they Spring Boot automatically Spring. We are not doing anything. Spring Boot automatically adds some jar files into the class path. Okay, this is the external library and this is the class path. Okay, yeah, that is the thing. Now it is the test. Like if we are going to we want to show Spring MVC. So here Spring MVC related jar file is already created. Okay. Now uh, here is a Spring Boot. This is the main point of the Spring Boot application. Whenever when we are starting our application, so this first of all, this main is the entry point of any Spring Boot application. After that, this run method is run method will be invoked. Okay, and based on run method, it will detect the class path which one is annotated with Spring Boot, a Spring Boot application. Okay, so here we are mentioning कि once once application created and run, then entry point of execution of application is main method. Okay, third. Okay, then run method. Okay, inside run method, it will invoke the class which is annotated with @Spring Boot application. Okay, now Spring Boot application is and Spring Boot application is combination of three annotation. Annotation is nothing but it's like to add functionality inside our application. Okay, so with the help of annotation we are adding functionality. Actually in earlier functionalities now they are added by marker interface, but nowadays they are annotation is replaced them. Okay, so main purpose of the annotation is it is a metadata. It contains some details about class and all these things, and they are adding some from adding functionality. Okay, so here Spring Boot application is combination of three application. Which one? Okay, auto configuration, then component scan. Okay, and uh, enable configuration. Enable configuration. Okay. So, okay, auto configuration means okay, based on available jar files inside application class path. Spring Boot automatically configure beans. Okay, whenever they needs. Okay. Second thing is component scan is okay to create and manage beans of application. Okay, first Spring Boot scans the base base package and its sub packages. Okay, and then scan needed beans ne- and accordingly really it will configure. And this annotation is generally used for enable configuration of beans. Okay, this is the main thing. Okay, okay. Application Spring Boot at the rate annotation. Spring Boot application annotation. They are made for uh, three annotation: auto configuration, component scan, and enable configuration. The main feature is it is a auto configuration is main feature of a Spring Boot framework. So what they are doing? Okay, without any interference of the developer, Spring Boot creates bean based on the jar available jar file. Based on the jar file, they are inside the application class, but automatically whenever they are needed, Spring Boot creates beans. We are developer is not creating any beans, external beans. Okay, Spring Boot is created and we are using that beans inside our application operation. Okay, so that is the main funda of Spring Boot. Okay, okay. Now we are going to uh, go inside some controller parts. Okay, so if I go controller, so what is a controller? Okay, controller is nothing, but it is a like entry point. Actually, earlier in MVC module, here I am showing in MVC module. In MVC module, what happened? Okay, there are three parts. M4 model. Model contains some business logic parts. V4 view contains some front end part, and control MVCC controller. Controller is nothing but it's a bridge, or it's, we can say that con- bridge between business logic and view. Okay, nowadays what happened? Okay, view and view view part and the backend part. view means front end and back end part, like business logic, like back end part, both are separated. But controller controller is a class which are connected. Controller is a class which is connected front end and back end part. Okay, so controller, whenever we are making any controller class, so first of all we need to make a base package. Base package is controller. Okay, inside controller, if we need to create one class, for example, we take app controller. Okay, so when we are creating any application regarding, we are creating any controller class, we need to first annotate it with REST controller. Okay. So what is the difference between what is REST controller? What is REST controller? Okay, REST controller is REST controller is equal to controller plus response body. Okay. So what is the controller? Okay, controller is it is a like na child annotation of the component, and a component is nothing but when we are when we are mark any class as a with annotation like an at the rate component, then we are not responsible for creating bins of that class. Okay, but Spring Boot automatically created class for Spring Boot automatically creates bin for that. Okay, the Spring Boot is responsible for making their that class bins and manages and handling entire life cycle of that class bin. Okay, so main controller is like okay whenever we are connecting any view front end to the back end. Okay, so user is not directly access any backend implementation logic. First, they are reading the controller part. Okay, so when a response body means okay in the which format the user gets response. So generally, response body they are get in the form of string. Okay. Now, second thing is request mapping. Request mapping is nothing but it is an annotation with which are map the URL to our method. Okay. So based on the request mapping string, we are mapping the HTTP URL. Generally, we are using HTTP. We are using the REST protocol to communicate with two web services in Spring Boot. Okay. So we are following REST standard. So here if we are mentioning anything, so okay, now here just we are defining any simple class which uh, returns string. First step, okay, and return ABC. Hello Spring Boot world. Okay, now the and here just we are putting uh, at the rate Gate mapping. Okay, so here we are just with the help of this is the URL at the rate apps. Okay, like URL format is like I am showing REST. REST is nothing but it is a standard protocol. Not we can say that protocol is HTTP, but it is a RESTful standard transfer. Protocol like it is a set of rules and conventions to communicate to web services over internet. Internet. Okay. So there is set of the rules and conventions to communicate to web services over internet. Okay. So this is the REST and this is the URL like localhost colon by default Spring runs by default Spring any Spring Boot application they are run on 8080 port. Okay, then we are at this part. Okay, after just when we are running Spring Boot application. So now we are going to run Spring Boot application. Now run. Here we are getting log. Okay, what are the inside the process happening when we are trying to run application? Remember one thing. This all method run main run method. All this method are run at runtime, not a compile time. Okay, so at the runtime, Spring Boot detects auto configuration. Spring detects some jar files which are available inside class path based on the dependency and based on some uh, application requirement. They are creating beans and injecting beans and we are using any application process. Just here at a Tomcat is embed by default embedded server. Okay, so for unlike Spring, we are not need to configure any web server web container inside to start our application. So Spring Boot makes life makes to our work very easy. We need to just run the application. Okay, so we can say that here 8080 port is running, and this is the first application. So now we are going to run. Just in go to we have to go browser and we need to run application like that. Great. We can say that see that here that application is work properly. Okay, so this is the first demo. This is the basic of the Spring Boot. How we are creating some APIs and we are developing APIs basic program of Spring Boot application. In future we are going to deep in Spring Boot and we are learning some more concept on Spring Boot. Okay. Hmm. This is the basic. Okay, thank you. And second thing is, if you want to learn anything about Spring, this is the best uh, resource to learn about Spring. You can go through and you can search and you can explore for many things. Okay.